Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. I've been waiting to say this for almost 3 months now. It's race week, everybody. As you can tell, I'm really pumped about this week and this season. However, before we take the green flag at Bowman Gray, we've got a lot to talk about in today's episode, including an interesting comment by Chad Knaus about Kyle Busch, Jeff Gordon talking about the 2025 rule changes, Justin Marks talking about those same rule changes, an interesting back and forth over the last couple days between Jimmie Johnson and Shaq, plus Johnson also made some news this weekend during the Rolex 24 at Daytona. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the Athlon Sports racing issue that's on newsstands today and why you need to pick one up. But before we discuss that, let's go back to last week and an appearance by Chad Knaus on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. The Hendrick Motorsports Vice President of Competition talked about the upcoming season and the big trip to Mexico City. And that's when the conversation took a wild turn.
You answer your own question then, see?
Well, that was until Adrian Fernandez got dumped in turn one, and then things got dicey down there.
Yeah. Wasn't that Kyle Busch?
Yep, leave it to Kyle to start an international incident.
He's had trouble in Mexico a couple of times, hasn't he?
Well, we'll just move on along. Let's talk about personnel changes. Are there any for Hendrick Motorsports in 2025?
Oh, man.
Keep digging.
Kyle's going to be calling me here in a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
There he is.
Line one, Kyle Busch for Chad Knaus. Go ahead.
Yeah, right, yeah.
No word if Busch made a call to Knaus. Moving on to our next story, but sticking with HMS. And Jeff Gordon also appeared on the channel last week and was asked about the rule changes for the 2025 season. He talked about changes to the playoff waiver rule and what he called the Kyle Larson rule, and then addressed the open exemption rule that will allow Elio Castroneves to race in the Daytona 500.
I mean, first of all, I'm super excited to have Elio Castroneves in the Daytona 500. I think that's fantastic, and we want to see Lewis Hamilton, right, and others that are on that world-class level be in the Daytona 500. And I also understand it's a significant investment by somebody like Trackhouse or whoever were to go about that to get that car and that team ready to get that driver influence to come there and compete in that. What I'm questioning, or what I need more answers to, is what's the criteria that dictates who gets in and who doesn't. Like, you know, does it just become a popularity contest? And what, again, popularity are you basing it off of? Because if it's an F1 driver versus, a sports car driver or IndyCar driver, I'm pretty sure most people would say that that's going to get more eyeballs. So, and then you've got, past champion, 7-time champion like Jimmie Johnson. Where does he fit in that kind of criteria? So that's my only question about it all, and I don't have all the answers, but that's certainly something I'm going to ask NASCAR when I get the chance to.
That's Gordon's perspective on the rule. He's got questions. Now, take a listen to what Justin Marks had to say about it over the weekend at Daytona.
Like, there obviously are people critical, like, how does Elio get in and Jimmie Johnson doesn't, or Martin Truex Jr. doesn't?
I think I understand the philosophy around it. I mean, I think that, if there's these big names that are going to put more eyeballs on the race and take the sport to new people, it would be, think of one day if we have Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen or somebody like that come and race the Daytona 500 and misses a shift on a restart, on Thursday and misses the race, and it really would take a lot of wind out of the sails. So I think if you look at the business as an event business, as a promotional business, they have the opportunity to make rules like that, make decisions like that, and so I understand it. I think I have to go read it. I mean, I think that we can still race our way in.
Right, yeah, because and then, if you race the way in, you get money.
Yeah, and then not use it. So
right,
that's what we're going to be trying to do, because that's a pretty material change to the business, being able to race in. So I understand the philosophy behind it. That showed up in the charter agreement. Everybody read it. I think we were the only ones to put our hands up. Everybody could, but we did.
I guess it goes back to what Gordon said. What if multiple teams put their hands up? Then who gets it? The most popular driver? It's a sticky situation, and we'll have to see how it plays out in a few weeks in Florida. Our next item is a funny exchange that started on Thursday when Shaquille O'Neal said this on X, quote, "Dang, Jimmie Johnson going for another Daytona? 22 years not enough for you?" End quote. To which Johnson replied, "You know it, Shaq. I've still got the drive. What about you? How's that jump shot these days?" And Shaq responded with, "Everyone knows I still got it, Jimmie Johnson. Come find me on the court." And yesterday, in the latest exchange between the pair, Johnson replied, "Haha, I love your coming at me, Shaq. Let's roll with a free throw comp. Should be easy for you when you're that close to the rim. Name when and where." Something tells me there's something more to this going on behind the scenes. It was so random for Shaq to do that. I guess we'll have to wait and see if anything comes of it. Moving on to our next item, and surprisingly, it's also Jimmie Johnson related. On Saturday during the Rolex 24 at Daytona, the Legacy Motor Club co-owner unexpectedly talked about possible expansion of the team in the future.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, ownership at IMSA could be a part of Legacy Motor Club moving forward.
Absolutely one of my initiatives, and more so than that. I think there are a lot of great opportunities, especially with a great partner like Toyota in all the divisions that they race in. So they know that we want to be everywhere. We're trying.
As you might expect, fans offered their opinion on Johnson's proposed plans, and a large majority of them didn't like it. "Need to expand into some top 10s, wrote one fan. "Maybe they should get one program performing well first, wrote another. And there was a lot more where that came from. I get it, but it's his money and he's going to do with it what he wants." And finally, the last thing I want to talk about in today's episode is this. The Athlon Sports racing issue hit newsstands around the nation over the weekend. I picked up my copy at Barnes & Noble. They're also available at other locations, including Target's. While some might say I'm a little biased because this is produced by the company I work for those of you who have seen this preview issue in the past before it took a little hiatus after the 2021 season, you know the deal. You'll be hard-pressed to find a publication that puts out a more thorough preview of the upcoming race season. And it's not just NASCAR. It also includes IndyCar and F1. But for the purposes of this show, I want to focus on the NASCAR side and give you a few highlights of why you'll want to grab one and use it for the entire season. For starters, there are some great feature articles, including one with Tony Stewart and his next chapter, another with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and returning to his short track racing roots, and yet another with Shane Van Gisbergen. All of them great reads. In addition to that, there's a great viewer's guide to all things motorsports for 2025, as streaming is now a part of the viewing landscape. I have to say probably my favorite article is 10 Tough Questions and Their Politically Incorrect Answers. Really good stuff that tackles questions like, will the Cup field allow Carson Hocevar to be a nuisance? Or will there ever be a new manufacturer coming into NASCAR and how it would affect the sport? And is the in-season tournament a way to generate interest in the sport? Definitely a must-read. But I think without a doubt for me, the best part of this issue is Athlon's ranking system and the driver profiles. I'm not going to spoil it for you who is listed at number 1. It's not a surprise. But the profiles themselves are filled with tons of information, including the driver's career stats, 2024 stats, 2024 results, and my favorite part of it all, the scouting report. These reports are what others in the industry think about a certain driver. We're talking team owners, other drivers, and media members. Here's an example with Chase Elliott's scouting report. One driver says, Chase is a good driver, but he could give back to the sport more. Another says, Chase is the epitome of class on the racetrack, fair and courteous. And one broadcast member said, there are times I just feel like he would rather be somewhere else. He's a super talent behind the wheel, but just doesn't seem interested in being the face of the sport. It's a shame because he could be the Dale Earnhardt Jr. of this generation if he wanted to, but we all know he doesn't. And one last piece from Elliott's scouting report, and it's from a rival team owner who wonders if Elliott is even all in behind the wheel. Chase is a really good race car driver, and he could be elite if he worked at it. I feel like he leaves so much on the table. He could be so much better, and the sport would be better off if he just worked at it. It's actually really remarkable how good he is for a guy that just shows up more often than not. He's dang good, but he could just be so much more. And I just hate that for him in the entire industry. So if you want to go behind the scenes and see what others in the industry think about your favorite driver, the Athlon Sports Racing issue is the place to do it. I will tell you the hard copy version is unquestionably the best to have in your hands and flip through all the pages and read all the great stories and profiles in one place. That being said, there is also a plan B available for those of you who can't get your hands on a hard copy. That's checking out the driver profiles on the Athlon Sports site. Each driver profile includes all the same elements. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to hear what you thought about it. First, let's talk about what Jeff Gordon and Justin Marks had to say about the rule changes. What do you think about what they had to say? Next up, what do you make of the X conversation between Shaq and Seven Time? Is there more to this story? And sticking with Johnson, what are your thoughts about him suggesting the possible expansion of Legacy Motor Club into other racing series in the future? Thanks again for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.